Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're going to come to order. Debbie is not here. I'll explain in a minute. We're going to come to order. So can I ask those who are not in the elections committee to please leave the room? No, I mean, who are not attending the committee meeting. I don't need people standing around talking. Yeah, okay. All right. So for those who don't know me, I am not Debbie Duke. I'm Andy Eller. I prefer to stand. Yeah. No, I'm not identifying as anybody else today. Debbie called me Wednesday and she could not make it. And I'm Andy Eller, I'm the vice chair. So she said, can you take over for me? And I said, sure. What do you have on the list? So she quickly read off some stuff to me and we're going to cover that pretty quick. This will be a pretty short meeting. The first thing she wanted to let the folks know is I know there's a lot going around in the state about Section 65, hand counting of paper ballots. And a lot of folks are questioning that and what's going to happen. Debbie is trying to work with the Secretary of State's office to get a memo or basically a letter. It's not going to be an advisory, but it will be a letter explaining the process in more detail, giving details. She believes that that letter will probably come out next Friday at the Secretary of State's training for the primary. So for those who don't know, September 29th, which is next Friday, the Secretary of State's office is holding training for the county chairs and various other folks who run the elections for the primaries. So that's where they'll talk about the Section 65. It will give more details behind what they expect from the Chapter 65 section of how to do hand counts, what that actually means. Yeah, the actual process itself, because the election code is pretty vague on it, but it does give a little bit of details. So this, as any agency would do, the Secretary of State's office can then give details on how they expect you to process those hand counted ballots, how it will actually transpire. It's an explanatory because there's been a lot of questions coming to the RPT as well as the Secretary of State's office on how to do it. There's only one county that I am aware of that has actually passed a resolution to do hand-counted paper ballots in the primary that doesn't already do them, because there's a lot of small counties that already do them. But Gillespie County just passed a resolution, and that's actually my SD, so I'm aware of that because I was involved with those discussions. And they will be hand-counting paper ballots in the primary, in the Republican primary itself. I'm not sure where the Democrats are going with their end of it, but that's their business, and we're going to be doing the hand counting. Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question. So the question was, do we know if the SOS is going to have handouts or packets for those who can't attend, who signed up? And the answer is yes. My understanding is they will be providing that to those who had signed up. They'll provide a link. It'll be posted on their website somewhere, and they'll provide a link to where you can go get the packets and all the other information. Right, and there was a statement that it would be all electronic. There won't be any binders, and that's my understanding. That's true. So if you are attending, and you might want to bring a computer, so make sure you got the stuff in front of you because you may not actually get the handouts. So that's where we are with Chapter 65. Are there questions or comments around the Chapter 65 hand counting? But that's just where it's going, because there's counties that are asking if they can do it, so, and how to do it if they want to do it. So 29th, the Secretary of State's office, yes. And then that will be followed by RPT training on the 30th, Saturday the 30th. There are two different locations, but they're both in Austin. And I think the folks who need to be there have been invited and they're aware of it. Yes. Right, we had to have signed up. The second thing that Debbie wanted me to bring up is asking for a special session for election integrity. I know the governor just announced that he's doing a school choice one coming up in October. We're hoping at some point he'll add elections to that, so we're pushing that. There are 4 areas that we did as an election integrity committee during the session that she would like to see continued because these things didn't actually get through. The first one is banning ranked choice voting, which is similar to SB 921. She's asking that that would be put on the call. So any conversations you have with legislators, the governor's office, we're looking at that. That was extremely important. It actually got fully through the Senate, did not get through the House, died in the House. So, and we passed a resolution here in the SREC, for those who may remember that, asking us to ban that. So the second place that she wants to look is SB 990, which is eliminating the countywide polling. And I know there is some controversy with that one, but that is another one of those bills that we're trying to get back through with election integrity and that the Election Integrity Committee was supporting during the regular session. So that's two of them. The third one is U.S. citizenship. There was supposed to be a constitutional amendment that we tried to get through this last session that did not pass, that requires that you be a U.S. citizen to vote. Now, I know you're saying, well, it should be that, it's that way now. Yes, it's in the election code that says you must be a U.S. citizen to vote. However, that is for countywide and state elections. It is not municipal elections. It is not school board elections. If it goes into the state constitution, it would take precedence over anything that a city or a municipality or anybody, a water board would do, anything like that. So that's why we're trying to push that one. That one kind of died again in committee, so she's asking that one be added to the special call. And the fourth one to the special call is what we call the jurisdictional bills. Those are, and I know Mr. Moore over here knows a lot about these. These are the bills where we were trying to find ways around the ruling that the Attorney General cannot prosecute election crimes, and trying to find either some type of election marshals, other areas. And so, I mean, at this point, Debbie and I have discussed this. We're not trying to specify exactly what we want, but we need something along those lines where we give jurisdiction back to the Attorney General or some other agency, or creating a new group that would actually be able to prosecute these election type crimes. So those are the items that we'd like to see on a call for a special session. Okay, the question was, any idea what date-wise we'd be looking at? And no, we do not know. I mean, we're asking for it as soon as possible so that we can get something through. But I know the school choice is going to take precedence over that, so. Okay. The third item Debbie wanted me to bring up was, I think many of you are aware of SB 1 from the 87th legislative session. We had a federal judge basically nullify and try to stop the use of the last four digits of the Social Security number or the driver's license number on mail ballots that's coming in as their form of identification. We are hoping that now we have our Attorney General back in office. Yay. That we will get that appealed as quickly as possible. The news media believes that that's going to happen. And I was just reading an article that Debbie sent me from Heritage Foundation that basically said the federal judge was actually acting illegally and unconstitutionally anyway, because it's already been found that IDs, voter IDs are are acceptable. And there's nothing in this requirement that takes it outside of a regular ID. It basically says you got to put the last four of your social or your driver's license number. If the numbers don't match, you still have the opportunity to cure your ballot, to fix those errors. It doesn't say you don't get a chance to vote. And that judge apparently took it as, well, that just means you can't vote. And so took that part of the law and said, well, that's not reasonable, but it is clearly reasonable. So it's expected that it would pass.
Isn't there also like magazine issued one of those identifications? So isn't there even the national bill government?
Yeah, the question was, isn't there ability, if you don't have the last four of your social or a driver's license or any form of ID, you can actually basically sign off that you don't have one of those. And yes, that is the case. That is just like it is during election day or early voting. If you show up and you don't have those, it's a reasonable impediment. You can still fill out a reasonable impediment that I don't have that, haven't been able to obtain it, whatever, and it would still be allowed. So yeah, that's why they're saying that all we need to do is appeal the ruling, and they believe the Fifth Circuit will actually turn that back and say, yes, that's that ruling is there. So SB1, that's the one we're worried about, and we need to get that fixed as soon as possible. So General Paxton, if you're listening, please get back to work right away and appeal this one, because we are needing that. And then, so that's it for that. And then the last item I wanted to cover, and actually Lucy Trainer was going to do this, but she cannot be here. So basically what we want to talk about is, I think many of you know Lucy was heading up the War Room, the Election Integrity Unit with the RPT. And for this upcoming election, we are not going to be having a specific War Room at this point. I believe there's not funding for that. So what she is actually working on is making sure every county understands they should have their own war room if they need it. You know, work through your county chairs and create your own war room where you can bring, you know, issues in and then get back out there with them. Because we're just not going to have that from an RPT standpoint. Yes, for the November election, yes. Yes, for the amendment election, yeah. And as part of that, she's also asking to collect volunteer information, people who want to volunteer for elections. Apparently, there are some county chairs who are turning back people who are volunteering to work elections, saying we don't need you, we don't want you, or they're not necessarily doing that, but they're just not following through when people are asking to volunteer. So Lucy's trying to put together, put together a list. We've created a form. I've worked with Lucy. We've created a form. It's not quite ready yet, and she will get that out. So if you visit, you know, any of the Republican women's groups, Tea Party groups, any groups like that, the SREC members take that form out and say, okay, fill this out. And it's actually online. So we actually have a QR code, and they can just scan the QR code. It'll take them right online on their phone, and it's a quick Google form. They'll fill out their information. So that way we'll have that, and we'll have this database of names that we can then shoot to the various counties when they begin asking for volunteers. So yes, and this is for people who are willing to work the elections. And that's not only just the constitutional amendment election, which is pretty much almost too late now, but especially the primary, because I know there will be a lot of primary folks needed. And especially if they want to follow the Chapter 65 hand counting, which I know Gillespie has, you know, they've said they need a lot of volunteers, and their actual county executive committee, as well as their local Tea Party and their Republican club, are all working together to bring in as many people as they can and get them trained.
On the hand counters, can they be volunteers, or do they have to be paid for it?
They have to be paid.
They have to be paid $60
Yeah, that is my understanding. Is, you know, they're volunteers who are stepping up, just like an election judge or a clerk. You're still a clerk. I know there are some folks that are saying, well, you can have poll watchers count. No, you can't. Poll watchers can't touch the ballots. They can watch somebody else counting the ballots, but they can't do it themselves. So the whole proposition is that you get enough volunteers that you do hire onto your basic payroll and you pay them. And I know there is some question behind how much of the Secretary of State going to actually pay for that in the primary. And my understanding is as long as you've budgeted it appropriately, they pay that into your primary account. You just have to make sure you're appropriating the funds properly. That's my understanding. So, like I said, I'm just the vice chair, so. That's what the Secretary of State's office, we're hoping to get from them, that I mentioned the first agenda item, is tell us how many people you need, you know, how do they do it in a group? You know, do you do 3 people in a group, 4 people in a group? How do you do that? You know, do you have a caller and a recorder, or do you have 2 caller, you know, a caller, a watcher, a record, you know, how do you do that to do it properly? Because there's nothing spelled out in the election code. But we want the Secretary of State's office to give us a best practice so that everybody who does it would be doing it exactly the same way. Okay? That's, yeah, go ahead.
So county chair doesn't help in elections. And then we, as SREC, collect their information so that they can help in the elections. Aren't we sort of going a bit right?
Yeah, and I kind of see it that way as well. We're kind of going behind the county chairs if they don't want that. But I may have missed. Yeah, and some of that is that as well, poll watchers, especially in the primary. We can't have, the party is really not doing poll watchers for the constitutional amendments election because you have to have, and Lucy and I actually talked about that as well, because you have to have an SPAC that would be for or against one of the measures on the ballot. And the party cannot appoint poll watchers. But in the primary, the party, of course, can appoint poll watchers as they need at various places. And yeah, I know we shouldn't, but but you never know. Some of these counties, what may be going on behind the scenes that we don't know of. Yeah. Yeah. Correct. And Ken was just bringing up that it's not a bad idea to have poll watchers when you have joint primaries where you have both Republicans and Democrats in the same room working the elections together. And I know that's very true for my county because we basically use we're countywide, fully electronic with the poll books. So when they check in, we actually don't even know if they're Republican or Democrat when they check in because they choose from the poll pad what ballot they want. And then it prints the proper ballot for them. So, and I know most counties that are that size will do that. But, so you have to have both sides of the poll watchers there to make sure they're getting, what they ask for and what's happening. So, okay. Sorry, that's all I've got. So, I'll let everybody go to lunch now. Yeah? Oh, okay, we have one more thing from Ken Moore here. Ken, do you want to come up and explain your projects you're working on for the next session? And then we'll adjourn after Ken is done. So, because the only reason why we're doing this, Ken, is because live stream, he wants to make sure they're on.
Oh, I see. Hello, everybody out there in TV land. You're welcome to be here. Okay, I have 3 projects I'm working on for the next session, or possibly if Debbie can get us a special session, maybe this time around also. One is I'm trying to resurrect a bill from the 85th legislature, and that's 2017. And there's a House and a Senate version, House Bill 2815 by Oliverson, and this is nursing homes. And what he would do is create a polling place inside the nursing home so that a patient can be rolled in, they can be qualified by a clerk just like anyone else, and that way this is a real person, they're alive, they're cognizant, they're not in a coma somewhere, and this is not some guy in the mail room filling out the application for them. Next one, there was a bill. I actually got 2 bills written in the 88th legislature, the regular session, that deal with poll pads. And I think they have different names in other places, but these are the machines that are used to check in voters when they come in. And what this does is it sets a time limit of 10 minutes that these things have to refresh. Now, just to give you a little brief explanation. These things, when you check in on one of these poll pads, it's supposed to tell all the other poll pads in the county, and this is for countywide voting, that you checked in at polling place X so that you cannot then go to polling place Y and vote again. Now, in order for this to work, it has to update in a timely fashion. And what we're saying here is you have to update within 10 minutes to maintain your certification and to get your certification. Oh man, there you are. This last session, okay, is the 88th legislature, House Bill 2728 by Dennis Paul. And then Mays Middleton had one in the Senate. It was SB 1875. So if you want to look those up. And then the third project, Andy has already kind of alluded to, is SB 220 from this last legislature. That was by Betancourt, and that's the election marshals. And what this does is it addresses, it trains a group of people to enforce the law. Essentially what it does. Some judges, it recruits some people from the DPS and trains them in election law so that they can hear cases and intervene when things are going on in real time. And so it spells out, number one, who has standing to bring a case. It spells out who has jurisdiction to hear the case. It spells out who can enforce the law. And it spells out what enforcement looks like. Does that mean you go in there and you haul them off in handcuffs and pound the equipment, shut things down? What does it mean? And so this bill answered all those questions. And it's been filed twice now in 2 legislatures. It didn't get a hearing this time around. But that's those 3 bills what I'm trying to work on. Now, the poll pads, go back to it for a minute. I need some help. If you can get with election workers in your districts and ask them to pay attention to their poll pads and see if they lose connection during the day. Because I know in Brazoria County, that's something we've had problems with. And if I can get documentation of that, that will give me some ammunition as I go to the legislators next session to talk about it. Also, the nursing homes. If you know stories of people who can't read a stop sign, who are somehow or another filling out a paper ballot and mailing it in, I would like to hear about that. I had stuff documented. That will give me ammunition when I go to the lawmakers. Any questions? Yes, sir. Yes. I'll give it to you in a minute. Oh.
SB 220.
SB 220. Yes, ma'am.
Webinars that have been done by the.
I think I was on one of those. I haven't been on all of them. No. Yeah.
They did one, and I think there are already some states where they do go to the nursing homes. I don't know how viable it is to actually have a polling place at each nursing home because there's lots of nursing homes.
Okay, she's talking about there's a group, election integrity national group. All right. And they have several webinars, several classes they give and discuss things. And one of them is on vulnerable voters. And she talks about that there's, she said, one state at least that has a program in place. Now, I know that Wisconsin has a program in place. And I think the way it works is you have 2 election judges, one Republican, one Democrat, that go into the nursing home with a machine and they go from room to room. And try to get the voters to ask them if they want to vote. And if they're unconscious, they can't respond, okay, we'll come back to them later. And then I think they give up after 2 or 3 tries. But again, that way you know the person you're talking to is the voter they claim to be, and you know that they're conscious, that they're able to vote. Does that answer your question?
Yes, only that it may be that there's some middle ground rather than actually have a polling place at each nursing home. I don't see how you need to in all this.
Okay, well, go with me later and I'll get your ideas. Yes. Anybody else? Okay, hand it back over to you.
Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.